that is what I like about, what we're doing is it is very different than what some of the other like entrepreneur type guys are out there doing, because they do have a very scripted content role. It's almost like they're reading off a teleprompter.
Well, because, they're doing a sales script, and that from doing sales, you, in your own mind, you have a script that works and that converts. And that's when you listen to most entrepreneurial podcasts, they're going to sell you on something.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't entrepreneurs hang out, goof off. It's entrepreneur tells you business stuff, but there's a call to action, and you need to join a mastermind course or something else, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But that changes. So they want the jump cuts real quick. And then there's also a difference between YouTube promo videos versus podcasting. So the podcasting on this will be more long and meandering and everything hanging out. But the YouTube videos, you do want them sharper. Mm-hmm. 3-4 minutes to the point, this versus that.
Right.
People want less filler.
Yeah.
Different medium.
Yeah. So,
even Joe Rogan cuts his. He does the big long stream, but they always cut them into segments.
Correct. He does a 3.5 hour deal.
Exactly.
And then they do slice and dice.
Yep.
Those. Yeah. One of these things that I think is really important for entrepreneurs, and I want to say that it doesn't matter what age the entrepreneur is, whether it's a 20-year-old guy or a 19-year-old guy, to a 50-year-old guy, moving into entrepreneurship after working, a corporate job. You really need to think about where you are in your mind. And I know that you're real big on this whole mindfulness, this idea of being mindful or mindfulness. But there's something that I read, I believe it was in Gorilla Mindset, that said, am I choosing to become the type of person that I want to become? And where I'm going with this is, right now I'm coaching a guy, and he has, some issues with like getting too emotional about little tiny things that are happening instead of seeing like the big picture. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do with my business. Or he's getting a little bit lost in, hey, I'm doing some work here and I'm doing it for free. Well, what's the long tail on that work, right? What does that lead to? And I think it's really important that entrepreneurs of any age look at that, and you have to step back and say, hey, where am I going? And am I willing to do the work to get there? Because a lot of these guys are not willing to do the work up front to get to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. To be able to do what you and I are doing right now, we're sitting at the Ritz Carlton overlooking the ocean in Laguna on the coast, the west coast of California. So truly, we're blessed. Mm-hmm. We're sitting at a marble table. We've got a microphone. We actually have a production guy behind the scenes working on this, and we've got over $3,000 worth of whiskey sitting on the table. How do you get from, the new guy shifting over to just seeing all that bling, right? But you have to understand that there's a lot of work to do, but the reward or the prize is really worth it. Because there's a freedom, and there's a sense of joy that comes from being able to do the things that you and I enjoy.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. One is because I'm always starting new businesses, so I'm always going, even though I have a built-in, like this podcast is a new business in a way.
Sure.
And so I'm always on day 1 or day 0 of launching something new. And the fundamentals are the same. That's what people don't like to hear. People don't like to hear the fundamentals. I don't believe in passive income. Sure, there's a way to get it, but if it's passive, you can ratchet that up to active. And if you ratchet, that's why nobody like Grant Cardone, none of those guys are working 2 hours a day, right? I think that's the biggest misconception. People who they're seduced by the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and they think that you just work a couple hours, but if you only want to work a couple hours, you actually will never be a success.
Correct. Because
you're going to work. So, I mean, sometimes there's nice that if you're in town, I just drove up I'm here doing this. We'll go have a cigar night. There's a freedom in that, but I got up early, worked all that.
Exactly.
After cigar night, I'll work until probably 1 a.m. On other stuff. And as we're here, I'm working on my stuff all the time too. And that's what the guys, they don't get, but
you love what you're doing.
I love what I'm doing, but I didn't always. I mean, there's things I don't like to do. The grind, right?
Right.
I still do a lot of the grind.
Well, there's calendaring, there's accounting, there's production, that goes into building these podcasts. There's a ton that happens behind the scenes with any type of production. There's a lot of production work and a lot of manpower that goes into that. And
that's what the number one thing, the number one lesson I always try to instill, especially the younger guys, but it applies to my own age, is every year I try to learn a new skill. And more than one skill, if I can possibly.
Sure.
Because skill building is compounded interest. Because every skill you have builds on every other skill. So if you know how to edit videos, editing videos is a skill, but what if you can edit videos and you can tell a story? What if you can edit videos and shoot your own film? What if you can edit videos and take great pictures and tell a compelling story? What if you can edit videos, take great photos, tell a compelling story, and sell a product? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you grow out your skill base. And that's why if people do intern, so much of that, they just want to follow the big dogs and hang out with the people, but they're not. You need to learn a skill, and you need somebody who is willing to mentor you on a skill. Okay, go on this sales call. Go on this sales pitch. Okay, if I were training someone, I would say, not to be too cliche, there was a movie, Sell Me This Pen, right? But what are the 10 biggest sales objections people have?
Sure.
How do you overcome them? Most people don't even know that there's a sales objection, right?
Right.
They don't even know that. So if they are interning or something, then they should be learning a very specific skill. They should be acutely aware of what they're learning, and then the mentorship relationship should be focused on what that person's teaching. That said, they can read books, and you can learn all that on the internet.
Right.
Nowadays.
It's really comes down to the old cliche of, you do have to pay your dues, and you're continue to pay those dues for many, 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 many years. Even when you are enjoying some of the fruits of your labor, decades later, you continue to grind. And so, it does go back to doing something that you enjoy doing. There's a lot of people out there, I think, in the social media world that just want fame and fortune and attention, and they don't really have a message, or they don't really have a purpose or a why to what they're doing. And it's really important to have that piece of why and what am I doing. But, I keep struggling with folks that don't want to put in the work. You have to do the work up front. If you're going to become let's just say a equipment operator, and you ultimately want to have your own fleet of bulldozers, right? You have to go out and find out who's got the best bulldozers in the world. What is the best school for me to go to? Okay, there's a school, a 12-week program in Houston, Texas that I can go and attend. And when I get out, I'm going to go and work for a union shop that does really high-end construction, because they're going to have killer, Bobcats, or they're going to have killer, Caterpillar tractors or whatever it is. I love the whole trade school thing, because I do believe that it's the on-ramp to entrepreneurship, but you have to put in your dues. You're going to have to go to the school, learn the craft, then go on the job and hone your craft. So it's more than just learning it. You have to hone it, and you have to put that time in. You might be at that union shop pushing dirt around for 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, however long it takes you to master that skill and become an expert, right? So that is essential to being successful. And then maybe you grab
thank you
and then maybe you grab a a loan, buy a $20,000 Bobcat and branch off and do some moonlighting work, right? And then eventually maybe you're able to leave your job. And I just use the heavy equipment thing as a metaphor for everything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, tonight, for example, and we'll have him on the podcast, there's a friend of mine. He was one of my original guys that before I became famous for what I'm famous for, he was beyond that. Before that, and he's a mechanic and he runs shops. So he started a shop and then he started a YouTube channel, and now he has 2 or 3 other shops, and then he mentored guys on how to build their own shops. And now he might want to do a franchise, right?
Right.
That's where he's thinking now. I have my own brand, I'm going to franchise. But he started as a mechanic. You start turning gears.
Exactly.
And way too many people think that some work is beneath them, or they like me. No work is beneath me. If it has to be done, I do it.
Right.
And a lot of young people, oh no, I just want to be the big boss man. No, you got to turn a wrench. You got to clean it. If you own a business, you got to clean your own toilets, right? At least starting
100%.
off. You're gonna have to do things that you don't want to do if you have a rental property and it tends to leave it a mess. You're going to be in there helping out cleaning.
Well, and ultimately, let's you continue to use this analogy of the heavy equipment guy, right? He's got to know how to service that piece of equipment, how to change the oil, how to put gas in it, how to operate it. And then after he masters all those skills to become this craftsman, if you will, of operating a Bobcat or a heavy piece of equipment, then if he transitions into entrepreneurship, he's got to learn accounting, marketing, how do I source jobs, and ultimately
payroll, 1,000 things that I never wish that I had learned.
Right, and how do I successfully manage people?
Cash flow, yeah. I wish that skills you don't learn in college or anywhere even. I never read a book, just cash flow.
Right.
Cash flow is king, right? Cash flow is everything. You learn that once you run your own business, but before you open your business, you don't really appreciate cash flow.
Exactly.
And how important it is. And you learn all of that, and you have to learn all of it, because if you don't learn it well enough, you'll get ripped off down the road anyway.
Exactly.
So even if you don't have to be your own webmaster, but if you know how to build a website, when somebody tells you a website's going to cost $20,000, you're like, no, that's bullshit.
Well, there's some real basic mistakes that I see entrepreneurs make, and I'm going to continue to use this analogy of the heavy equipment guy. But he goes out, he's like really excited. He just got an $8,000 job to level out, an acre of dirt. Okay. So he loves the guy he's working for. He's like, oh, this guy's great, etc. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, start plowing that field. No contract.
Right.
Just a promise and a handshake.
Right.
He deploys his equipment. He deploys his time. He gets 25% of the way through it and finds out that maybe this guy isn't going to pay me, but now he's too deep into it. So these are basic entrepreneurial things that you don't learn a lot of times until you're in the business, but you've got to have a contract for service. You don't start service until you've got a contract for service.
Slow pay. There's 1,000. Yeah. There's 1,001 different ways that you learn, and
right.
I wish more people talked about that, but it's harder because that's not what people don't want to hear that. Most people don't.
Well, they don't.
Most people want to hear, do this thing and make millions of dollars, and not hear, you're going to get cheated a few times. I've been stiffed on a lot of things.
Yep.
Or
things don't happen the way you want them to happen.
People overbill you, lawyers overbill you, just things are like, doesn't take that long, shouldn't take that long. Yeah, everywhere you look, which is why maybe if you go to trade school, you get a good job. Not everybody needs or wants to be an entrepreneur too. That's
exactly. Well, there's a whole nother side where you can take those well-earned wages and those higher wages that those kind of jobs pay, and then parlay that into a side hustle. Maybe it's owning a rental property.
You get a good job and you do a good job, and you go home and you go to the gym and you live a nice life and you keep costs low.
Exactly.
And you don't buy dumb things, and you don't buy Rolexes and Ferraris and everything. You just live a nice life.
I got a lot of friends in Missouri that live that life and are very happy.
Yeah, you're just content. You go home, you have a nice house. $200,000, you have a nice house in a lot of the country.
Right.
You're not leveraged. Everything's chill. There's a lot to be said for that too.
Yeah. Well, it's why we see, a migration to some degree out of, California and out of some of these high tax and, very expensive coastal cities, more inland into, areas in the Midwest. and into Texas and areas like that is, you can have a job making 75, 80,000 a year, maybe 90 with some overtime, and live in a $150,000 house that's actually in a nice neighborhood.
Yeah, and it had raised kids, and everything's nice, as long as you don't get caught up in the rat race, caught up in the Spanish games, caught up in the luxury goods game.
Yeah, interesting piece. So anyway, well, that's an interesting segment about how mindfulness and kind of learning your craft and understanding where you're headed is really important, and paying those dues up front.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.